Hi guys, welcome back to Mirepoix. This is going to be our last one for a while. Don't worry, we are coming back, but we're just going to take a little break. So like I do in all my videos, we're going to spend about 5 to 10 minutes at the beginning, just going through what was in the box, how I've made it and why I've done that. Then I'll briefly touch on the equipment we're going to need, and then we're going to start cooking. So if you fancy not listening to that, we'll put a little link at the bottom with timestamps and you can just skip straight to it. Okay, so for the starter this week, we have a vegetarian starter. It's a squash sort of anna or a squash tree, whatever you want to call it. So in here is going to be your squash. Just leave it in the paper because we're going to heat it up in this. As you can see, you've got different layers of butternut squash that's been cooked in squash juice, and in between the layers we have salt, eartha chili flakes and a spice blend. So it's going to be a little bit spicy, but not really, and it's going to be quite sweet from the squash, and obviously it's going to have salt coming through it. To go with that, we have the whipped feta. So this is going to be the salty element of the dish. Obviously feta and naturally salty cheese. The carrot crumb. So again, this is going to be quite sweet. So you've got two sweet things going on, which is going to be balanced out by that salty feta. You've got the squash seeds, so instead of just throwing them away, I've just toasted them off. Toasted some off lightly, toasted the others off hard, so you get sort of different nutty flavours coming through from that. And then for the acidity, we have these pickled shallots, so that's going to cut through the richness and the sweetness of the rest of the elements. For the main course this week, we have skate cheeks. So these are very similar to scallops in texture-wise. If you've ever eaten scallops before, you find that they've got nice long muscle fibres, nice muscle strands. And if you look at the cheeks themselves, so they're identically set out. So we're going to cook them just like scallops as well. Obviously they're going to taste slightly different, going to be slightly meatier in my eyes. We've got the parsnip, lemongrass, coconut broth. So this is going to sort of be the main element of the dish. It's quite a thick broth. It's almost going to be like a sort of fish stew that we're sort of making. You've got the rice crackers. So what we've done here is we've cooked rice off. We've made a spice paste, like a classic sort of jungle curry, Thai jungle curry spice paste, which we've dehydrated. And then I've blitzed that up and folded it through the cooked rice, and then we've dehydrated the rice as well. After that, we chuck it in the fryer and it puffs up like this, so you get a nice sort of cracker texture in your mouth. And finally, just to garnish, we've got a few spring onions. Okay, so for your dessert, we have the pear creme fraiche and hazelnut brittle. So I'll just quickly talk about each element. So the pear itself, these are wild pears. And you'll find with wild pears, they're not going to be as sweet, and the texture tends to be a lot harder. So to sort of soften them up and sweeten them up, we've braised them for about 2.5 hours at 90 degrees in the fermented honey. So fermented honey is exactly what it says. It's honey that's been fermented for a minimum of 2 weeks. And we've fermented it with chilies and citrus coming through, so you're going to get a sort of very, very big depth of flavour within the pear. This is served with a sweet hazelnut brittle. And then we've got creme fraiche. So creme fraiche is a French equivalent to sour cream, slightly thickened, and that's obviously going to be, like it says, slightly soured. So that's going to complement the two sweet dishes, the sweet two elements. And then finally, to go on the top, we've got a bit of beetroot powder. Going to add colour, and it's going to add a nice salty sort of savoury note to balance everything out. Okay, so there's a few bits and bobs that you're going to need to do this menu. So first of all, a few cupboard staples. We're going to need a knob of butter to cook off the skate cheeks, obviously some salt and some good quality rapeseed or vegetable oil, any sort of oil, preferably not olive oil as it doesn't have that sort of high smoke point. A few bits of equipment. Going to need one small saucepan, one frying pan and a couple trays, a couple trays like this, can be smaller and bigger, and then obviously a few containers just to put things into. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is going to set up a sort of bain-marie / water bath style thing to heat the sauce up. So you're going to take my pot like this, I'm going to fill it with water, and then I'm going to bring it up to temperature, up to a boil really quickly, and then turn it right down. So that's just going to be used to heat through the sauce that we eat for main course. So we don't need it to be boiling hot, we're going to aim roughly for 65 degrees. While that water's heating up, we're going to preheat the oven so we can heat up our squash anna. So I'm going to set it to about 180 degrees and just let it preheat. Okay, so I've just brought this water up to temperature. Let it cool down slightly. So, like I said, 65 degrees. If you don't have a thermometer, the best way to test that, you should be able to hold your finger in there for literally 1 second. If you can hold it there for longer, it needs to be hotter. And if it's raging hot, you can't hold it there at all. It needs to be cooler. So that's roughly 65 degrees. So I'm just going to drop the sauce in there, and I've turned it right down. So it's going to let it heat through slowly while we're eating and plating the starter. Alright, so for your starter, the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to heat up the squash terrine, the squash Anna. We don't want this to be super hot. We just want to take the fridge chill out of it. So it's not going to be in there for long. We're just going to heat it up so it's roughly warmed through. So it's warmed through. While the Anna's heating up, we're just going to separate some of the shallot rings. So these have been pickled in a walnut pickle liquor. And then obviously you can see shallots grow in rings, so we're going to want just some single rings for presentation on the top. So just take a few off. Probably going to want between 3 and 5, depending on how much acidity you want. Okay, so the squash has been in the oven for 5 minutes now, and I'm just going to check it to make sure it is warm enough. So you just want to touch on the outside and just feel for the warmth. Like I said, it doesn't need to be raging hot. You just want it to sort of soften a little bit and warm through. So once it's like that, it's perfect to go. Okay, so for dressing the starter, the whole idea is we're going to have the terrine on one side, the Anna on one side, and then a big dollop of the feta on the other side. So you're going to have sweet and salty separated. So the idea is that you can sort of pick at one and pick at the other to sort of balance it out in your mouth. Yeah, so to do this, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the terrine out of its packaging, out of the bit of paper. Just make sure you throw away little bits of paper straight away. And I'm going to present it with the sort of the lines on the side, so you can see that from the side of the plate. I'm going to put the carrot crumb along the top, but the best way to get it to stick is to put a little bit of feta on there as well, and that's going to stop all the crumb falling off. So just take a spoon, just a little bit of feta, just put a line down the middle, and then with the back of your spoon, just flatten it out. And that's going to act like glue for the carrot crumb. So exactly, carrot crumb now. Don't worry if it goes on the tray. You can always scoop it up. And you just want to make sure you hide all that whiteness that you put on there to hold it down. Just so you get that striking difference on the plate. One side's going to be white and the other's going to be very orangey. Yeah, so when you've got a decent amount like that, and you're happy with it, it's not going to fall off, we can put on the seeds. So with your squash seeds, I'm just going to sprinkle a few of them on, not too many. You won't need too many. And this is mainly the texture of the dish, so this is going to be the crunch. Make sure you do get some of the lightly toasted and some of the darker toasted ones, so that flavour profile is changing in your mouth as you eat. And then finally, the pickled shallot rings. Okay, cool. Then once you're happy with it, make sure you get your serving plate quite close. Sort of mitigates the risk of it falling. And then using a fish slice or a burger flipper or some form of spatula, just gently pick it up and then place it off centre to the side of the plate. And I just want to take a couple of seconds just to get rid of any sort of the carrot crumb that's attached to the bottom of it. Wicked. Get rid of the tray. And then lastly, we're going to put a nice big dollop of the whipped feta. So the easiest way to get this onto it is to take a spoon that you've run under hot water, or it's been in hot water, and this will help the feta come off the spoon as it hits the plate. Okay, so I've got my hot spoon. You're not going to be able to get a rocher with this just because this is too loose, but you're going to try and get a nice sort of dollop. I'm just going to put it in, get a nice amount on the side, and then we're going straight onto the opposite side. A little bit of carrot falling off. There you have it. Squash anna, spiced carrot crumb, squash seeds, pickled walnut, pickled shallots, and then your salty feta mix. Okay, so now you've had the starter, the main course is going to come out very quickly. So it's quite intelligent to get set up over here first before we start cooking anything. So obviously you're going to need a shallow bowl to eat from. I've got my spring onions in a little container in front of me. I've also got my rice cracker, a chopping board and a knife to open the bag, and I've also got ready a bit of kitchen paper on top of a tray. So this is going to be to drain off the cheeks once they're cooked. Like I said, when you're cooking fish, it's going to start getting very quickly. So now we're set up over here, we can go to the other station and we can set that up. Yes, just like we did over there, we're just going to set this side up. We're just going to set this side up cooking. So the first thing I'm going to do is get my pan preheating. So I'm going to turn that up to 8, so obviously bear with me, I know we talk about this every week, but all different hobs are going to be different. So this one goes up to 9, it's induction, and I put up an 8. So it's basically, I'm heating this up to a high heat. I brought over my tray with my kitchen paper on, I've also got my salt, my good quality rapeseed oil, and then some butter. So just as it's heating up, I'll give you a quick explanation of how we're going to cook it. So we're going to cook them just like you'd cook a scallop. And if you don't know how to cook a scallop, the best way to do that is to colour both sides, or with a scallop you colour the top, the bottom, and then you go round. And then you finish it with butter. So the butter's going to add obviously richness, and it's going to help steam it through in the centre. So just like that, we're going to colour the outside of the cheek first, flip it over, colour the inside of the cheek, flip it back, chuck in the butter. And then we're going to get it nice and foamy just to finish cooking it off. Yeah, so the pan's hot now, so I'm just going to add my oil in. Just get a decent glug of oil, just so you get that nice colour caramelisation. While the oil is heating up, we can season the front of the cheeks. We'll season the back side once they're in the pan. So just a nice amount of salt on each one. Just check to see if your oil's hot. 30 more seconds. So with the cheeks, just take 2 and we're going to put them in away from you. So always put things in the pan away from you so the oil doesn't go. And then you're just going to hold them down for 30 seconds just so they don't bow up. If it starts to spit and it's a bit too hot for you, you can use the back of a spoon or a fish slice, and then with the last one in as well. So I'm not pressing. If you press your meat when it's like this, you're going to push out the juices and it's going to make the meat drier. I'm just holding it flat so it gets a nice even caramelisation. You can season the back now. You just want to keep just turning them over and just checking the level of caramelisation. We're looking for a golden, quite a nutty golden brown. Cool, that's the colour we're looking for. So once it gets to that, just flip them all over and repeat on the other side as well. Okay, so we're not going to take the back side as golden as the front, as the presentation side. We're just going to want a nice little amount of colour if you come in closely. So I'm going to colour the back like this, but the stops are nice and golden. So once you've got that, we can turn the pan heat down to a medium heat and then chuck the butter in. As soon as the butter goes in, you want to lift the pan and just keep moving it like this. And you can see the butter starts to foam. It's not burning, it's foaming. So that's getting really nice and hot. And then you just want to let them rest in the butter for another 30 seconds to a minute, just to finish cooking through. And that's going to add that sort of final level of richness to the dish. If the butter stops foaming and goes black, it's burned. So just take it out and put another knob in. If it goes flat and it's not black, it just needs to be agitated a little bit more. The best way to check these, give them a nice little push, and once you feel them just starting to give, you know they're cooked. So when the flesh just starts to fall apart, you know it's cooked. So we can take these off and just let them rest off in this tray here. And we can turn this all off. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the sauce into the bottom. So I'm going to hold the backpack bag over the side of my chopping board, push it back with the edge of the knife, and then just cut the top off. As ever, make sure these go straight into the bin. And now with this, I'm just going to pour it straight in to the middle of the plate. And that's going to be a nice, even circle. Next, I'm going to try and make this stand up at the back, so bear with me, it's obviously going to be backwards. And to do this, I'm going to place the 3 just on top. And then finally, I'm just going to place the spring onions over the top at the back. And there you have it. Skate cheeks, parsnip coconut lemongrass broth and a rice cracker. Looks simple, but it's going to fill you up because that broth is super thick and indulgent. I hope you enjoy. Okay, so for the dessert, we're going to caramelise the front of the pear. Just a word of warning, when you're caramelising fruit, especially pears and apples, naturally high in sugar, and then they've been braised in sugar, so these are going to caramelise very quickly. So the key is a low heat. We don't want it to caramelise too quickly because you're just going to get sort of a black, acrid flavour. So we just want a nice sort of slow, it's going to take about 5 minutes to caramelise, maybe less if we're lucky. Yeah, nice slow caramelisation. So I've preheated the pan here to a medium to high heat. So that is on 6 out of 9 at the moment, so it's about 2/3 of the way. And I've just put a tiny amount of oil in. That's just to help it, help the caramelisation along and just stop it sticking right at the beginning. So once that oil's hot, we're going to put it in, obviously face side down, and just like we did with the cheeks, we're going to push it nice and flat to try and get an even amount of contact with the pan. That's going to obviously create even caramelisation. Okay, so that's hot. Just going to put it in, run it around the pan, and then I'm pushing in the centre line. Obviously, when you cut a pear and you cook it, it's going to bow out like this. So then, as I push it in the middle, it's going to flatten it and get that even contact there. It's going to be very hard to get a perfectly even caramelisation. So if it's most of the way there, you've done a pretty good job. Yeah, so this has probably been about, let's say, 3.5 minutes to 4 minutes, and I just kept checking it, flipping it over, and you can see here, this is the sort of colour we're going for, this nice golden brown. So that's obviously the sugars being caramelised in the pear and changing colour. So I'm going to leave it for another 30 seconds just to get it a little bit longer, and then she'll be ready. Okay, so for the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the creme fraiche with the lime zest on the plate. So just like we did with the feta, I'm going to take my warm spoon. This is obviously a lot thicker, so we should be able to get a much nicer scoop. So warm spoon in my hot water, and I'm just going to place that on the back there. So in. Get a nice big dollop like that. Next I'm going to take my pear, and I'm going to place that just inside on the front, just resting up against the scoop. And then my 2 brittles, I'm just going to place it just sticking out of the creme fraiche, and then finally with the beetroot powder. So there's multiple ways of doing this. I think for this dish it looks better if you just take a pinch and you just throw it at the plate, so you get a nice sort of scattered look. So just take a little bit like this, and then hopefully don't get it everywhere, just try and aim for the plate, a bit like darts. Guys, there you have it. Fermented honey, braised pears, hazelnut brittle, beetroot powder and lime zest creme fraiche. We really hope you've enjoyed this week's menu. Let us know what you've liked. More importantly, let us know what you didn't like. And thank you for ordering our last one for a little bit. Cheers.